off this press availability just by welcome my colleagues. Minister Chrystia Freeland from Canada, thank you for being here in Mexico. Ambassador Lighthizer, thank you for being with us here in Mexico today. This is the ministerial meeting that closes formally the 7th round of negotiations. And obviously, a big thank to the teams from the 3 countries that had made a great effort today. And thank you, the members of the press, for your interest. And I welcome the stakeholders from Mexico, represented by the Consejo Consultivo, that are joining us today. Thank you. Ambassador Lighthizer, the floor is yours.
Well, good afternoon. Let me begin by commending Secretary Guajardo for a terrific job hosting this 7th round of negotiations here in Mexico City. It is a privilege to return to this great city. Not long after I was last here, Mexico was struck by a devastating earthquakes. Your nation's rapid recovery from this tragedy shows the great strength of the Mexican people. You deserve our praise for that and our continued prayers and support. I would like to thank both you, Secretary Guajardo, and Minister Freeland, for your hard work and for the hard work of your able staffs. We have to keep in mind that there were several hundred people working very long hours for several days during the course of this process. We are dealing with a large number of difficult issues, very technical issues, and I appreciate the efforts made by all negotiators. In spite of this hard work, we have not made the progress that many had hoped in this round. We have closed out only 3 additional chapters: good regulatory practices, administration and publication, and sanitary and phytosanitary measures. We have also completed work on sectoral annexes related to chemicals and proprietary food formulas. And we are making substantial progress on telecommunications, technical barriers to trade. We have also agreed to include a chapter on energy. These chapters are important and provide further evidence that all 3 countries want to upgrade and modernize NAFTA. But to complete NAFTA 2.0, we will need agreement on roughly 30 chapters. So far, after 7 months, we have completed just 6. Now, granted, these things tend to converge more towards the end of a negotiation. As I have said since August, we have 2 major goals in these negotiations. First, we want to update NAFTA to address modern trade issues. All 3 countries agree that NAFTA is outdated, and I believe we should be able to reach agreement on new issues like digital trade, labor and environment, intellectual property, and much more. We urge all parties to move more quickly on these issues. Second, we believe that NAFTA should be rebalanced. This has been a long-standing U.S. concern about the treatment of our workers and businesses. From our point of view, among other things, changing this agreement so it no longer encourages outsourcing, developing rules of origin that will fairly treat our manufacturing sector and workers, and reshaping the rules of government procurement are very important. We also need to make more progress on these points to conclude a new NAFTA. We continue to stress the need to act quickly. Now our time is running very short. On July 1, as everyone here knows, Mexico will choose a new president. That campaign, as I understand it, begins in earnest just next month. But Mexico is not the only NAFTA country in the midst of elections. Both Ontario and Quebec have elections scheduled later this year. Finally, the United States has midterm elections coming up in November. All of this complicates our work. I fear that the longer we proceed, the more political headwinds we will feel. I also note that in all 3 countries, reaching an agreement at the negotiating table is only part of the process. In the United States, after an agreement in principle is concluded, Our laws require public disclosure of texts, further consultations, and numerous reports before it can be considered by Congress. Thus, in the U.S., we must resolve our outstanding issues soon to maintain the possibility of having this measure be considered by the current Congress. As President Trump has said, we hope for a successful completion of these talks, and we would prefer a three-way tripartite agreement. If that proves impossible, we are prepared to move on a bilateral basis if agreement can be made. We have tried to be clear and very specific about what we hope to see in a new NAFTA. We are prepared to work continuously to achieve a breakthrough. I understand that these talks are not easy for anyone. Each of us has our own political concerns. But we are at the point where we have very important decisions to be made. If the political will is there, I am certain that we have a path to rapid and successful conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Minister Freeland, please.
Muchas gracias, Ildefonso. Buenas tardes. Es un placer
Thank you,
estar.
Ildefonso. It's a pleasure to be here once more in Mexico to meet with my counterparts here for us to conclude our work to modernize and improve, enhance NAFTA. Thank you, Secretary Guajardo, for having us and for being so graceful, as you are always so graceful in your hospitality. Let me point out that since we lifted the visa requirement between Canada and Mexico, tourism has grown in a very sound manner. In fact, until September, we had an increase of 52% in visitors of Mexico to Canada, including students and tourists. And these numbers show the strength and the importance of our bilateral relationship, and certainly of all the North American community.
And to continue our discussions on how we can make NAFTA better for workers in all three of our countries. And I would like to again offer Canada's condolences to the American people in the aftermath of the Parkland, Florida tragedy. Canadians have the parents, families, and friends of all of the victims, and indeed all Americans in our hearts at this difficult time. To begin, I'd like to thank my colleagues here on the podium with me for their very hard work. As Bob said when we were in Montreal, we're getting to know each other quite well, and I think we're becoming friends. And I would also really sincerely like to thank our negotiators who are working so hard to update and improve our trading relationship in a way that is win-win-win. You are an extraordinary group of professionals, and we are all very grateful for your efforts. Depuis le début de ces négociations, l'approche du Canada a été de présenter des idées et des solutions qui profitent aux trois partenaires de l'ALENA et de contribuer à la compétitivité de l'Amérique du Nord. Le Canada demeure résolu à poursuivre ces discussions constructives et en collaboration avec nos partenaires de l'ALENA. From the outset of these talks, Canada's approach has been to propose ideas and solutions that will benefit businesses and workers in all three of our countries. Canada remains completely committed to this goal. In these negotiations, we have sought to be constructive, fair-minded, and determined to reach not just any deal, but a good deal. That very much remains our approach. NAFTA has been in place for 24 years, and the economic results are not in doubt. We know this agreement has created jobs, supported growth, and raised living standards for people in Canada, the United States, and Mexico. Having said that, this agreement is 24 years old. It needs to be modernized. It needs to reflect the reality that technology, business, and society have evolved. And it does need to be updated to broaden the benefits of trade to more people. President Trump has said that his most important goal is to help American workers and to help the American middle class. We in Canada have exactly the same goal for our workers and our middle class. This can and should be a shared project. That's because trade is not a zero-sum game. In trade, we can all win. And we need to all win in order to achieve an agreement that will benefit all of our people. This negotiation can and will be successful if together we can make North America more competitive in the world, create more jobs, including manufacturing jobs, here in North America. North American competitiveness is essential to our economic prosperity and to our ability to compete globally. Here in the 7th round in Mexico City, we've made solid progress. Our negotiators have been toiling away on some of these bread and butter chapters for months without a lot of fanfare. Yet these issues are hugely important to businesses and individuals who work across our borders, and we are moving ahead. In previous rounds, we closed chapters on competition, small and medium-sized enterprises, and anti-corruption. Here in Mexico City, we added substantially to that effort by closing the Good Regulatory Practices chapter, the Publication and Administration chapter, the Sanitary and Phytosanitary chapter, the Chemicals Annex, and the Proprietary Food Formulas Annex. And we are beginning to make headway on some of the more challenging issues. At round 6 in Montreal, Canada offered creative ideas to initiate a discussion about these areas. That discussion has been constructive, and it continued here in Mexico City. We are making progress, but we do have significant work ahead. Let me pause for a moment on a separate point. Last week, I issued a statement about the U.S. government's pending announcement on steel and aluminum imports. What I said then remains Canada's view. As a key NORAD and NATO ally, and as the #1 customer of American steel, Canada would view any trade restrictions on Canadian steel and aluminum as absolutely unacceptable. We will always stand up for Canadian workers and Canadian businesses. Should restrictions be imposed on Canadian steel and aluminum products, Canada will take appropriate, responsive measures to defend our trade interests and our workers. And we will continue to stand up for steel and aluminum workers and industry. To conclude, we know that trade between Canada and the United States and Mexico is good for all 3 of our countries. Today, the 3 of us have a historic opportunity to improve and modernize NAFTA, to bring more jobs and growth to North America, and to make North America more competitive in the world. We do have a lot of work ahead. Canada is committed to the success of this negotiation, and I look forward to continuing that work in Washington, D.C. in the 8th round. Thank you, and muchas gracias, Ildefonso.
Thank you, Minister Freeland. And if my colleagues will allow me, every time that we're in Mexico, I take the opportunity to deliver my comments in Spanish. So this time it will not be the exception, and I will kindly ask you to use your translation devices. Primero,
first of all, let me thank my colleagues and Minister Freeland and Ambassador Lighthizer, because with your presence you are clearly sending a message of commitment, a commitment in which we believe, all 3 of us with great professionalism, that there is the right landing track to reach an agreement that we may sustain with great advantages for all 3 countries. Undoubtedly, to accomplish this, we have to be sensitive. We have to understand where the other one's standing so that we may be closer to a conclusion that will be good for all of us. In this round, I have already congratulated our teams of the U.S., Canada, and Mexico, because I do coincide with Ambassador Lighthizer. The 6 chapters of 30 are not many in 6 months' work. However, the 7th round in Mexico has contributed exactly with the same number of chapters that we had already accumulated in 6 previous rounds. So in this round, we're increasing 100% the efficiency, and this makes sense with what Ambassador Lighthizer just said to us. As we get closer to the end, undoubtedly, the timing is taking us, allowing us to start complying with our objectives, to start closing our differences as well. On this occasion, I think that the 3 closed chapters, as my colleagues have already said, are very good chapters. For instance, the one on good regulatory practices. How many times our industries are saying that it's not logical that if we're doing things together, we are facing regulations and different types of procedures. This good practice chapter chapter on regulatory practices. This is a common regulatory framework among all three countries, and to reduce unnecessary, excessive, redundant regulations, because there's makes us divergent in North America. It creates a North American committee chapter to monitor the implementation, to exchange information, and to do joint work incentivizing good regulatory practices. The one on transparency is committing us so that we can really share with our friends in the United States and Canada clearly all the information affecting exporters, service providers, and investors, to guarantee access of information on laws and regulations that clearly affect any of the topics we're trying to cover in this new NAFTA. And finally, another chapter on sanitary and phytosanitary measures that, aside from guaranteeing certainty that our agricultural products are going to be traded in North America without any artificial obstacles, but also guaranteeing food, vegetable, sanitary measures based on science. And this is great progress, because this chapter for the first time prioritizes the requests or applications coming from North America vis-a-vis other countries, and also allows for a working plan in reasonable timeline so that we can have the equivalence and regionalization. So then the truth is that this is a great improvement and enhancements in the current sanitary chapter that we now have in NAFTA, and the two other annexes that are sectorial annexes, chemicals and formulas and patents. Now then, the list that I shared with you, Christia, and that Ambassador Lighthizer and Christia shared with you, these are chapters that are practically at the closing level, with one or two differences that we believe that in this round, at the 5 weeks, we can cover those. Which are those? Telecommunications, which practically we have a common vision, guaranteeing free competition in telecommunications market in North America. And digital trade or commerce, there's just one obstacle we have to solve, and technical obstacles to trade is just using another chapter. And then the energy one, that we finally have the necessary text for us to be able to summarize them. And the state-owned companies and the financial service one, those are chapters that are right at their own reach for us to be able to address them. This is not ignoring that undoubtedly the fundamental purpose is how to have a convergence. And in this convergence, it is very important for us to understand, undoubtedly, to be aware of rebalancing trade. And this is an objective that we can take upon ourselves, provided we have the mass of the expansion of trade, of the strengthening and also the enrichment of productive chains and value chains in North America as well. In this sense, I truly thank the commitment and the conviction of my colleagues, because undoubtedly we can now, if we continue making these efforts, we are going to be able to move forward and have a convergence of all the issues we're discussing to reach conclusions. Of course, there is no doubt that the timing, the timeline is always very important. There will be political calendars in all three countries, but what we have to be very much aware of is that the final result will be sufficiently strong for us to all be in the possibility of delivering our countries and saying that NAFTA is in the best interest of all three nations, for us to be able to do in any moment of its conclusion to carry out a public debate so that we can move forward in this agreement. And this is something that we are going to be closing in the future. Thank you so much for your presence. Thank you so much for your commitment. And thank you, everyone, for being here with us today.